day, everyone. Today we were going to talk about the urbanization and rural to urban migration. But first, let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why so many people from provinces moves to cities? It is because it is connected to the economic opportunities, job opportunities, and better services. According to the United Nations, more than 56% of the world's population now lives in the urban areas. In the Philippines, urbanization still continues to increase due to the economic opportunities in major cities like Metro Manila and Cebu.
So, before we proceed to the main discussion, let me first define the key terms shown in this slide, which is rural, urban, and migration. So, rural areas are places with low population density, meaning not so many people live there. These areas are mostly focused on primary sectors activities such as agriculture, farming, forestry, and mining. In simple terms, rural areas are provinces or countryside places where farming and natural resources activities are common here. The next one is urban. Urban refers to the cities or towns with high population density, meaning many people live close together. These areas have many buildings, roads, housing, and other infrastructures. Most jobs here are agricultural, such as office work, factory jobs, businesses, and services. And lastly, migration. Migration is the physical movement of people from one place to another. It involves a permanent or semi-permanent change of residence. So, when we say permanent migration, it means a person moves to another place with no plan of going back. They change their residence completely and settle there for good. For example, a family from the province moves to Manila and decides to live there forever. On the other hand, semi-permanent migration means the person moves for a long period of time, but not necessarily forever. They may still plan to return home someday. For example, a worker who moves to the city for several years to work but plans to go back to their province later.
Now that we have understood the key terms, let's proceed and define urbanization and rural to urban migration. So what does urbanization mean? So urbanization is the process where more and more people start living in cities instead of rural areas. So over time, the population in urban areas increases, while the population in rural areas decreases. So this usually happens because cities offer more job opportunities, better education, improved healthcare, and better infrastructure, such as roads, transportation, electricity, and communication systems. So for example, when factories and businesses are built in cities, they create jobs. So because of this, people move there to find work. So as more people move in, the city grows bigger. So that growth is what we call urbanization. Now, let's define rural to urban migration. So rural to urban migration happens when people move from provinces, farms, or rural communities to cities. So this movement is usually done to improve their quality of life. So there are two main reasons why people migrate: the push factors and the pull factors. So first are push factors. So these are problems in rural areas that push people to leave, such as low income, limited job opportunities, lack of schools, and poor healthcare services. So second are the pull factors. So these are advantages in cities or urban areas that attract people, such as higher salaries, more jobs, better education, and modern living conditions. So for example, a farmer earning a small income in a province may decide to move to the city to work in a factory or the office where wages are higher. So that decision is rural to urban migration. So in simple terms, rural to urban migration is the movement of people, while urbanization is the overall growth of cities that happens partly because of that movement. So both processes are natural parts of economic development. That is why urbanization and rural to urban migration are closely connected and very important in understanding economic growth.
Major urban problems. First is overpopulation. Naging masikip ang lungsod dahil sa dami ng tao. For example, siksikan ng mga tao sa isang barangay, kaya mahaba ang pila kahit sa tubig o kalim. Housing shortage. Kaunti lang ang may maayos na tirahan, kaya dumadami ang informal settlements or slums growth. Ang halimbawa nito, maraming pamilya ang napipilitang tumira sa barong-barong dahil walang sapat na murang pamasahe. Unemployment or underemployment. Hindi talaga sapat ang formal at matatag na trabaho para sa lahat. Halimbawa nito, marami ang nakapagtapos pero hindi makahanap ng trabaho, kaya ang iba naman ay nagiging part-time job. Traffic congestion. Kapag dumadami ang sasakyan, kaya mas lalong bumabagal ang biyahe. Ang halimbawa nito, umaabot ng 2 oras ang 20 minutes dapat na biyahe dahil sobrang dami ng sasakyan. Pollution. Tumataas ang pollution sa hangin, tubig at ingay dahil sa dami ng tao and living. Ang halimbawa nito, makapal ang usok sa kalsada at mabaho ang kanal dahil sa basura at sobrang dami ng tao. Rural problems due to migration. First is loss of skilled workers. Kung ang mga tao na umaalis na may nakasanayan kaya humihina ang lakas sa paggawa sa bahay. Halimbawa nito, umaalis ang mga karpentero at mekaniko papuntang Maynila kaya kaunti na lang ang marunong mag-ayos ng bahay at sasakyan sa lahat. Decrease in agricultural production. Kapag mas kaunting magsasaka ang natitira kaya nababawasan ang production. Ang halimbawa nito, kaunti na lang ang magsasaka kaya mas kaunti ang ani ng palay sa isang taon. Aging rural population. Kapag dahil kakaunti ang tao at resources, mabagal ang progreso ng rural areas. Halimbawa nito, karamihan ng naiwan sa barangay ay matatanda, kaya mabagal ang pagunlad at kaunti lang ang nagtatrabaho.
Role in economic development. First is creating jobs, industries, and services. When cities grow, maraming mga businesses ang nag-open, like mga factories, mga companies, or more likely mga malls. This create job opportunity for people. Example is kapag nagbukas yung mall is maraming pumapasok na mga people na gusto mag-apply para sa cashier or let's say mga guards or managers. Next is increasing productivity through labor concentration. So here, when workers daw is nagtalo in one place, nagiging efficient yung trabaho nila at nagiging napapabilis nila so that yung mga companies is naka-hire ng mga skilled workers and huge increase production. Next is encouraging innovation and technology. Cities are more likely center of education and businesses so that maraming mga professionals doon and mga companies doon na work together. So, parang nag-share sila ng mga ideas para nila innovate yung isang city. Next is attracting domestic and foreign investment. Investors prefer cities because maganda daw yung mga infrastructures, transportation, and mga malalaki daw yung mga market doon. So, example is yung mga foreign companies nag-invest sa Manila because maganda daw yung mga tao doon, like skilled yung mga workers na maganda yung internet access and especially maganda yung mga infrastructures. Next is cities generate a large portion of national GDP. Businesses and industries are located in cities because nakaka-produce sila ng malaking part sa economy's total income. So let's move on benefits of migration. First is migrants earn higher income. So here, people who move rural areas to cities usually find good paying jobs, so which improve their quality condition. Next is remittance support rural families. Here, migrants daw is nagsasend ng mga pera sa mga pamilya so that para matulungan mo yung mga pangangailangan, mga pagkain, pang-education, and so on and so forth. Next is skills and knowledge transfer. Migrants learn new things from others and can share that knowledge to others to improve the productivity in rural and urban areas. Next is reduction of disguised unemployment of agriculture. In rural areas, marami mga nagtatrabaho sa mga farms. So, kapag yung iba naglipat sa cities, nagre-reduce siya ng overcrowding and increase efficiency in farming.
Now let's talk about the policies that governments use to manage urbanization and rural to urban migration. So urbanization is normal in economic development. However, if it is not managed properly, it can cause unemployment, congestion, housing shortages, and poverty. That is why governments create policies to make development balance between rural and urban areas. So the first policy is rural development programs. So the goal here is to improve life in rural areas so people do not feel forced to move to cities. So the government can improve agricultural productivity by providing better farming tools, irrigation system, and training. So they can also build roads, schools, and hospitals in rural communities. So when people have jobs, education, and healthcare in their own province, migration becomes a choice, not a necessity. So for example, if farmers are given more modern equipment and access to markets, their income increases. So because of this, they may choose to stay instead of moving to the city. So moving on to the second policy, which is decentralization. So this means developing other cities instead of concentrating everything in one major city. So industries and businesses are encouraged to invest in secondary cities. So when factories and offices are built outside the capital, job opportunities are spread more evenly. So this reduces overcrowding and traffic in large cities and allows smaller cities to grow economically. So for example, instead of building all factories in Metro Manila, industries can be built in cities like Cebu or Davao. So this helps reduce congestion in major cities and spreads economic growth more evenly. So when we say congestion, it means too many people, vehicles, or activities in one place at the same time, causing overcrowding, delay, or difficulty in movement. So, moving on to the third policy, which is urban planning and housing programs. So, when cities grow too fast, informal settlements or slums can appear. So, a slum is a highly populated urban area where people live in poor housing conditions with limited access to basic services like clean water, sanitation, and electricity. So governments respond by building affordable housing, upgrading poor communities, and improving zoning laws. So zoning laws are government rules that divide land into different areas and control how each area can be used, such as for residential, commercial, or industrial purposes. So this helps improve living conditions and prevents urban poverty from becoming worse. So the last and fourth policy is the investment in human capital. So this means investing in education, skills training, and technical vocational programs. So when workers are trained and educated, they are better prepared for industrial and service sector jobs. So skilled workers increase productivity and help the economy grow faster. So these policies aim to create balanced development so that urbanization supports economic growth instead of causing social problems. For example, technical vocational programs can train workers in welding, electronics, and IT. So this makes them more employable and helps industries grow. So moving on to the models of urbanization and migration. So the first model is the Lewis model of modern sector growth, developed by Arthur Lewis. So this model explains that the economy has two sectors, The first sector is the rural sector. So this is usually agricultural based. So in rural areas, there are often too many workers on farms. This is called surplus labor. So because there are too many workers, productivity is low and wages are also low. So the second sector is the urban or industrial sector. So this sector includes factories, businesses, and industries. So these jobs usually pay higher wages because they use machines and technology, making workers more productive. So the important part of the Lewis concept is that the industrial sector can keep hiring workers at almost the same wage for a long time. So this happens because there is a large supply of surplus labor coming from agriculture. So as long as there are extra workers in rural areas, factories do not need to raise wages much to attract employees. So according to these models, workers move from rural areas to cities because city jobs pay more. So as industry grow, they absorb or hire these rural workers. This helps the country develop economically because industrial production increases. So for example, imagine a farming village where 10 people are working on land that only needs 6 workers. So the extra 4 workers are not really increasing production. If those 4 workers move to the city and work in a factory, they can earn higher wages and produce more goods. So this increases the total output in the country. Some workers do not significantly increase food production. So if a fewer workers leave, total farm output will not decrease much. However, this model has a limitation. So it assumes that cities have enough jobs for everyone who moves there. But in reality, that is not always true. Sometimes, people move to cities but they cannot find work at all. So overall, the Lewis model of modern sector growth explains that economic development happens when surplus workers move from low productivity agriculture to higher productivity industry. So as factories grow and absorb these workers, industrial output increases and the overall economy expands.
Next, we have the Harris-Tadaro model. It was developed by John R. Harris and Michael P. Tadaro in 1970. So, this model explains why people continue to migrate to cities even if there is already high unemployment there. The main idea of this model is that migration depends on expected income, not on actual income. Meaning, people decide to move to the city based on what they think they can earn, not necessarily what they are currently earning. So what happened is, because of the expected wage in the city is higher, many rural workers decide to migrate to urban areas. But the problem is that cities cannot provide jobs for everyone. So even if many people move to cities, some of them remain unemployed. For example, imagine a farmer in the province earning $350 per day. If he hears that factories workers in the city earn $700 per day, he might decide to migrate to the city. Even if there is a risk of unemployment, he is willing to take that risk because the expected income is still higher. So to conclude our report, urbanization is not the real problem. The real issue is how prepared we are to handle it. Migration will continue because people will always search for better opportunities. The question is not how do we stop people from moving, but how do we create opportunities everywhere? Because when development is balanced, when both rural and urban areas grow together, that is when a nation truly rises. So remember, urbanization does not destroy a nation. Poor planning does. With the right policies, migration becomes not a crisis, but a catalyst for progress.
I just had to let you know you're